Hello everyone, and welcome in. We are back for another edition of the Japanese Grand Prix. It is our fifth and final round of the week, and it is of none other than the club division taking us through the final round. As always, of course, Unicorn, how are you doing today? Joining me on the comms as always.
Yeah, I mean, the club division, it's always some very exciting, tight racing. These guys, we say it every week, and I'll say it again. They've had the week. They've had the week. Most of them will have raced at least once here this evening in the past week. So they're ready and raring to go with a race under their belts in most people's cases.
Big shout out to OG Prime Boss in the chat. Thank you very much for your tier 1 subscription. Greatly appreciate the support. Of course, let's take a look at this circuit. It is 18 turns here around Suzuka, and there's only one DRS straight, as we've seen all week long. It's 5.8 kilometers, and it's it's a figure 8 circuit. There is a bridge where cars go under and cars go over. It is lovely to see that, and it is an iconic circuit that we have seen a ton of, iconic moments in throughout the history of Formula 1. This is round 18, of course, and we are going to be looking next week ahead to the United States Grand Prix. Then we have 3 rounds left after that in Mexico, Brazil, and then the final round of Abu Dhabi. And this grid has been very, very tight in the standings here so far. Of course, let's take a look at who is driving on this grid today. We have ZZ9 and Fraser over at Mercedes, with Alex Bitto and his newest teammate Distinctive at Ferrari, Ben the Bear and Remco Van Putten for Red Bull, Mito and Burke over at McLaren, with Seb and Zamis over at Renault, Freeware and Finn for AlphaTauri, as well as Burke, Khan and Jones over at Racing Point. Alfa Romeo holding on with Shenjie and Money, Tim and Sever and Jinkari over at Haas, and Domi and Mammal round out the 20 racers on this full-time grid over at Williams. Let's take a look at the standings. Japanese Grand Prix round 18. Here are how things landed after Russia. ZZ9, 239 points. Shenjie is right there behind him, 232 points. And Alex Bitto, who has been dancing with ZZ9 all season long, has now got to hunt down not only ZZ9, but Shenjie just ahead of him as well. And Ben the Bear, with 4 or 5 rounds left here, he might just be able to get in some solid points to really contest that front end as well, should ZZ9 run into any trouble with the other two. Now, Mercedes, Red Bull, Alfa Romeo, those are your top 3 in the constructors right now. Now, following last week, Russia, we had Shenjie promoted to P1 after a penalty appeal. Freeware was demoted, as well as ZZ9 and Alex Bitto, 2, 3, and 4 for those positions respectively. Mammal to P7 after Fraser received 5 seconds for crossing the pit exit line. So watch that. If the game doesn't award you the penalty, at the very least the stewards just might. Of course, that is the standings, and with that, I do believe we are just about ready to go racing here. Unicorn.
Yeah, I think we're just waiting on a couple more drivers to get this grid to its fullest. But yeah, those top 3 very tight at the top, and you know, we're in the final 5 rounds now, but it's still anyone's game.
Very excited to see get any kind of full wet weather, because it's something we haven't. We've had a little bit of a gradual rainfall that came through in the European split on Tuesday, but since then we haven't had anything else. We haven't had anything else as far as raindrops here in Suzuka, so maybe the club division is the division that gets lucky here on a Friday.
Yeah, and I think the thing with throwing rain into the club division race is that, like we said, they've practiced throughout the race, but throughout the week, but because none of these guys have raced in those full wet conditions, you know, like you said, EU, we had those intermediate conditions at the end of the race. But I don't think anyone's been in the full wet, and if we do see that, that would basically make it an entirely new prospect for most of these drivers. As we're just waiting on just a couple more people, I think.
Just waiting on a couple drivers to get in here. Waiting on, I think, 1 or 2 more drivers. Sorry, just waiting to get people in. Of course, I do believe, Unicorn, you can flag the lobby to start things. If they aren't here, well,
Yeah,
that sucks to suck.
We've sent out 30-second warnings. They've all been tagged, so if they don't make it, indeed, we will just go on without them.
I've also realized that my lovely splash ticker here isn't entirely up to date. We're here for Club Division, Tier 1. Club Division, not Tier 1.
Yep, so there's the 30-second countdown started in the lobby. We are ready to get everything underway. It looks like one of the missing pieces to this puzzle would be Alex Biddo, which isn't going to help his chances at all.
He's sleeping, like so we're just gonna go.
He's just loaded up the game, so he should be able to join. It's like bang as this gets underway, but
well, he joins late. That's on him. Not gonna sit here. I don't think anybody else wants to sit here waiting for a guy. All right. We are finally loading into this session. And it's going to be 27 laps here around Suzuka, of course. We have not entirely a full grid, but considering how the racing has gone this week, that might be not necessarily a bad thing, considering these drivers, well, most of the championship battling racers are here, waiting on Finn, Burkikon, Jinakari. Tab into the game, please.
Yeah, I think we saw some just super tight racing, and the start can be difficult for people to leave. It seems as if they're fairly easily, and it's hard to break out of that train until people behind start battling, and that's when the drivers ahead of those tricky battles start to just lead themselves away and run away with it.
There we go. 16 drivers in the session here. Remco Van Putten, BTFU, Burke Khan on the grid, as well as Zamis, Jinakari, Domi, Distinctive, Fraser, Wisp, Freeware. We have ZZ9, Finn, Shenjay, Mammal, Rutanius on the grid as well, and Brainstew bringing up the rear of the timing tower presently, bottom of the timing tower presently. And we are now being told that it is going to be a full wet race, and it would appear that the Codemasters gods at B have donned us with the precise dynamic that I was expecting and hoping for. So get your friends, grab the popcorn, share that link around, help us out. Of course, my name is Strifium. Joining me is Unicorn, because you are about to witness a full dry qualification followed by a full wet campaign here in Suzuka.
Well, the trick here is that these drivers, they've been treated with a dry qualifying, and if it's a full wet race, you've got to make the decision. Where do you want to place your setup? Most of these drivers, you know, they're in these league races and they'll have a setup prepared for both conditions, but now they have to choose between which one they want to use, because if you use the dry setup in qualifying, you're going to have the dry setup in the race that's full wet. So I imagine we're going to see some slightly below par qualifying laps here as people are forced to use a wet setup and a dry track.
First driver out of the pit lane. I'm just trying to catch up with who that is.
Burke Carney's just spun out of the hairpin on his outlap.
It seemed my spectator settings were reset as a result of Alex Biddo joining the lobby.
I do believe Mammal is now in lead charge of this outlap race, as it were. The spin coming out of Burke Khan. I wonder whether that was influenced in any way by a setup choice. Obviously, likely he's got increased ride height, etc. I'm not too well versed in the differences between the wet and dry setups, but the car is not going to be feeling good on this dry track compared to what they would have been hoping for as Mammal sets himself out to be the first person to start a flyer here. Down towards the first corner then, we're going to see a lot of moves into here. DRS, super powerful down this straight as he comes up towards the famous S's section, which has caught quite a few people out this week. We've seen it so many times. These walls, they're very, very attractive, and you can see there someone's had an issue. I believe it's Finn. He seems to have retired the car into that wall, coming out of the Dunlop curve, then into the first Degner. Keeping it nice and tidy. This is a fairly easy place to invalidate, but he's kept it nice and within the lines, keeping it within the track limits, up towards the hairpin then in the Williams. Keeping in second, short shifting to third as well, so you can see he wants as much traction out of here as possible. Now the run into Spoon. As fast as he possibly can. You want to keep as much momentum going because there's no DRS on this back straight as we approach the famous 130R, hugging the left side as tightly as possible, switching out to the right as obviously he sets fastest sector 2 into 130R. Then comes the Williams, just a few corners to go into the chicane at the end of the lap, just about missing the marker there and keeping it tight to the pit wall. He enables DRS, and across the line he opens with a 126.5 in the Williams. Who else we got crossing the line? It looks like Shenjie is about to come and start his first flyer. It's a 125.7 from him. Remco Van Putten, he is flying as well. Coming out of the final corner. And it's a 126.6 for him. So Shenjie right now very strong as Zamas crosses a 126.9. Okay, Khan. We saw him have that spin earlier. Running out of fuel, trundling it into the pit lane. His teammate BTFU not too far off, as well as Rutanius, reserving this evening a 127.1. BTFU slots himself just ahead of him, a 127 flat.
Domi in the Williams, he has not got a valid lap going right now. Distinctive, however. He is purple coming through into Sector 3, now through the Casio Triangle in the Ferrari. Distinctive to the line. This is his first opportunity in a reserve capacity, and it's a P7 at 127.823 out of him. The first time for him in a MRL race, if you will. Razor, low fuel light. I think he's had an issue costing him a lap. Freeware jumps into second position, a 126.265.
Yeah, I don't know what Shenjie's doing in that Alfa Romeo, but he's doing something very well. He's still 5 tenths clear. Basic maths coming into question there, but very strong lap. Whether he's using a slightly more adaptive setup that favors the driver just a little bit more than these drivers who may or may not be on the wet setups that they're going to need for the race. So it's interesting. Has Shenjie gone for a gamble there, or has he just perfected using a wet setup in the dry here?
One thing I am coming across right now is that there is a unfortunate bug in my spectator menu. I don't know if you have the same, but I have the ability to highlight AI potential drivers in this lobby. That's not something I've had to deal with yet this week. This, I think, is the only grid we've had that's had less than 20 drivers in it, so I haven't had that issue just yet. Jinakari's flying, as is Wisp. Wisp is quite quick through Sector 1 right now. Purple Sector 1 for him in the Haas. He's just exited through the second Degner. Coming down into the hairpin now.
Yeah, and I know that he's not particularly happy about having this Haas seat. He's not a fan of driving this particular car in the game, and that's just the seat that he's got here in his reserve capacity. But using all of that exit curbing out of Spoon. Now down through 130R, just keeping his foot flat on the throttle. Nicely done through the chicane. And it's going to be to the line. Very, very tight to the pit wall. 126.7. That puts him 5th in the current standings. Alex Biddo, joining the session late, is aborting his fly. He's going very slowly through the second leg now. The championship leader, ZZ9, just starting a flyward to see where he can put himself up onto this timing tower as he comes to the S as his teammate Fraser just ahead of him. You have to wonder whether the team dynamics is going to come into play once again here. Pretty tricky to do around Suzuka, but I guess you could try and orchestrate something down that back straight. There's no DRS, so it would give you an advantage. Fastest sector 1 for ZZ9 coming down into the hairpin then, and I don't think this is going to work out for them. Fraser is going to hold him up. He might be able to give him a little bit of a slipstream down towards Spoon though.
These two, you and I bring it up every race. These guys and their team tactics, we've seen it with Fraser and ZZ9 all season long, utilizing toes. I don't know if it was the right toe though. I think he might have been better off getting one out of Spoon instead of into Spoon, but I'm not entirely sure. Carrying a good chunk of speed through 130R, however, is ZZ9. He's coming into that Casio triangle. He's got the McLaren just ahead of him. That's Brain Stew. E2, wow. 125.991 out of ZZ9 here. Brain Stew. That 126.6 for his first lap on. We've got 4 drivers yet to set times, 3, as Burke Khan jumps in. 127.671 his first run. Alex Biddo, who had a good outing here in Tier 1 racing yesterday, finishing in the points with his teammate Brownie. He'll be looking to put in a good performance as well, having had that repetition around the circuit this week.
Yeah, he's got that low fuel. I do believe this is his second lap out on this tyre. The timing tower, I'm not agreeing with that statement though, but he set a fastest sector according to the track map, so could be very nice stuff on the Spaniard, who takes a lot of that inside corner. I'm very surprised that wasn't an invalidation, but
very fortunate. P5, 126.5 out of the, well, the Spaniard driving in that scarlet red Ferrari here today. His teammate Distinctive in his full-time debut, actually, at Ferrari, as Jake has stepped down due to time constraints. And now Domi, 137.396 from him. He is just going to be beginning his lap. Fraser coming through the chicane now, that Casio triangle, running through across the start-finish line. That's P2 out of the Mercedes. Very, very tight between him and his teammate at the moment. Shenjie looking like a cut above the rest right now. We take a look at the gap to leader between Fraser and Shenjie. It is nearly 6/10. However, it is just shy of 2/100ths of a second separating Fraser and his teammate, and Freeware isn't too far behind.
yeah, well, Shenjie's just put an improvement in for that 125.3. And there's also worth noting, look at the gap between Mammal and Alex Biddo as well. 9,000th of a second between the pair of them. So some super tight battling coming out in qualifying, and that usually translates into some very, very exciting racing. As BTFU is having another crack at the lap. He is flying through Spoon at the moment.
Shenjie is giving Domi a tow. Through into 130R. That's a purple sector 2. I don't know if Shenjie realized he was doing that or if he's just trying to stick it to these Mercedes, but what's Domi going to pull through here? The Williams now running out of energy deployment. Crossing the line, it's P6. He just jumps ahead of Mammal by a 10th. BTFU, coming through in the racing point as well. Says hello P6. There's a 126.4 out of him. That's a 4:07.
Yeah, really nice, almost 7/10 improvement there coming out of the racing point. So very well put together lap. And it's also worth noting, everyone on the softs, if you're just tuning in, there's a reason for it, where it we're expecting that heavy rain, so no reason to attempt to qualify on any other time when you're going to start on the wets regardless, or at least the intermediates, depending on how heavy that rain is.
Taking a look at someone who's on an active flyer, and I do believe we're at this point in time, calm before the storm. Nobody really getting set to go on a flyer. I think Distinctive actually may be the first driver out to get a lap
I think
in.
Mammal's flying.
Has Mammal begun a flyer? He's just begun a
flyer.
flyer.
Started through the S's.
I'm looking on with Distinctive. He's on an out lap, but he's really punching it with that battery. He's already utilized a lot of this battery, and it appears he's just going to come back into the pit lane. We'll hop on with, of course, the Williams. That's Mammal. Currently 8th on the timing tower, 126.540. He's looking to improve on. He'll be making his way out of Sector 2 in just a moment, and we'll be able to really realize whether or not he is up on his presently set time. Coming down through Spoon.
Yeah, and right now he's just ahead of Alex Billow, so he wants to extend that gap. He wants to really clear the Spaniard, overtake his teammate, and probably put himself up into that top 5 is going to be his hope. He needs to find about 2/10 to do it and beat Remco Van Putten. Very nice time. He's almost 4/10 up. This could fly him possibly into the top 3, depending on how well he does this third sector. Coming now out of the final corner, down towards the line. It's 4th place at 126 flat. Not missing the mark by much, but he's still putting himself into that second row, and he's 2/10 clear of free row as well, so he'll be pretty happy with that lap, I imagine, and he's got time for one more as well.
Realistically, from second all the way down to, I think it's 12, it might actually, it's 13th. From second down to 13th is less than a second the gap. Shenjie kind of making things a little bit staggered on that timing tower for gap to leader right now, but it is quite tight. Considering Fraser is just shy of 6/10 off of Shenjie. You look at Zamis there in 13th on the timing tower. He's a 1.4 off of Shenjie. That puts them within a second. So things are very, very tight on this timing tower right now. Brainstew, the Italian, he will be next across the line here to set a lap, and he's in that McLaren.
Have a look
dear.
outside of the car.
Ooh.
There is no front wing on this McLaren. I'm not sure where he lost it. Finn pointed out in the chat, and it was before the hairpin, so I imagine he's had some sort of issue through the S's or Dunlop. But he's not going to be very happy with that. He's got time to come in and change it and go for one more run, I should think.
Okay. Crossing that line in the racing point. It's an improvement, but it isn't enough to get him ahead of Distinctive.
It looks like he might try again.
He's very close to Distinctive, and he might just have it in him to get through. Remco Van Putten has just begun a flyer. Mammal's on his way into the pit lane after, of course, that lovely P4 time, that 126.086. Behind him, ZZ9 has just began.
Remco, he's been knocked out of the top 5. He's going to want to get back into it. He's not far off for freeware's time, but Mammal about 3/10 ahead of Remco. So there's a pretty big divide there between P6 and P4. But I imagine that as we approach the last couple of minutes of the session, you can see the outlaps popping up. There's a lot of people on flyers as well. Only 3 drivers in the pit lane right now. And we're about to see the times come crumbling down. But Remco, not on for a huge improvement. And I think, unless he messed up Sector 3 in the first time, I don't think he's going to even get past freeware here. He's not. He's still P6. Half a 10th improvement for the Red Bull.
ZZ9 is on an outlap. ZZ9 is flying up into 130R right now, and I think he's getting a cheeky toe out of Fraser again here. I'm on board with Alex Bitto. He's looking to improve. He's coming out of the chicane, just leading ahead of them in that Ferrari. And what's the time going to be? 126.550. That was a millisecond. A millisecond off his previous time. ZZ9 jumps Fraser into P2. However, Fraser He held up after giving ZZ9 that toe, which means ZZ9 is going to be a portion ahead of him. And I think we're going to see some more toe tactics coming in, if you will, out of this Mercedes squad.
Yeah, what's crazy there is that ZZ9's just improved by about 4/10, and he's still 2/10 off of Shenjie. It just goes to show, even with the toe, how good Shenjie's time is. And speaking of Shenjie, he's out on a flyer as well. Like you said, Fraser is going to get a toe, I think, off of ZZ9, but he's down through Sector 1, so it's not looking good for the Mercedes in the hope that they might get at least one of these cars ahead of Shenjie.
Well, drivers starting to take the checkered flags here as the session has come to a close. Mammal, Rutanius, Jinakari, all done. They will not be improving. 126 flat out of Mammal. Beautiful time from him into P4. Remco catches the checkered flag at 126.339 from the Red Bull. Rutanius, he ran a 126.6. Here we have it. The toe now. Fraser on the rear of ZZ9 coming through into 130R. Jinakari ran a 130.2. He's caught the flag as well. Fraser is going to be coming right behind BTFU. BTFU in that racing point has entered the pit lane. Fraser improves by a 1/10.5, but it isn't enough to jump himself in front of his teammate. ZZ9 just a little bit ahead of him. Freeware
on an invalid.
Well, Freeware is invalidated just the same, and Shenjie, well, it looks like
scraping himself through the grass. I don't know what's happening. Domi spun it as well out of Dunlop, so a lot of these drivers having issues, and could this give someone like Brain Jr.? He's invalidated as well. I think qualifying now is pretty much done and dusted. Distinctives in the grass. What on earth has happened on this final few laps?
Pressure. I think everybody wanted to get some final laps in.
Well, I think we are looking at the final grid order.
Well, thank you very much to Zamis for the rate of 9, sir. P7 for you. I hope your race goes well. Welcome in, everybody, from Zamis's end of things. As we are about to go racing here, and this gap to leader from ZZ9 is 160. Fraser down through all the way to Wisp is a, well, actually even Distinctive is a second. So things are going to be quite tight here. Quite tight.
Yeah, I think what we're going to see here is maybe Shenjie and ZZ9 start to break away, but I think we're going to see that snake start to form through the S's, and no one's going to be able to break out of the train.
Well, there you have it. Shenjie on pole position in the Alfa Romeo. ZZ9, the championship leader presently in P2 on the front row. 0160 separating him from Shenjie at the moment. Fraser in P3, the other Mercedes as well. Mammal in fourth. Freeware rounding out the top 5 drivers here, the German in the AlphaTauri. We will, of course, be going down through the rest of this grid with you on the formation lap. And just one thing to take a look at is, yes, the intervals right now are very tight, especially between 3rd down through 14th.
Worth remembering as well that we're not going to be seeing the same conditions that we've just witnessed, so pace in the dry may not necessarily convert pace into whatever we're about to see, and goodness me, that is a lot of rain.
Yeah, for those that are just tuning in, we forgot to mention it heading into the race, but it's a full wet session. Share that link, of course. Tell your friends. We have some seriously fast drivers going around some extraordinarily torrential conditions. And if you were tuning in with us for our Endurance Series last Saturday, we have found that in some of these races, the conditions can get wet enough to bring out a safety car, as we saw around, of course, the circuit Gilles Villeneuve last Saturday. But now we're here in none other than round 18 of Club Division action. It is the Japanese Grand Prix. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. My name is Strifium. Joining me from the UK, as always, Unicorn. This is going to be an absolute thriller.
Yeah, I think that the qualifying order is going to be vastly different from the order that we see across this finish line. As there's just huge puddles on the track. You can see there the predicted pit stop strategy suggesting nothing but wets.
Look at the tracks that Shenjay's car is leaving right now.
I mean, the track itself looks like plastic. It doesn't actually look like tarmac.
This is going to be a very interesting opening lap, especially through the first sector. And something that we normally talk about on these formation laps, Unicorn, is the tire strategy. Well, the strategy is quite clear today. It's wets the way through. And of course, Dunlop for these drivers, as Shenjay comes through, he's not even touching this throttle right now. He's not pushing. Of course, it is the formation lap, but it is slick. Very, very slick. I'm not entirely sure. Has Shenjay had an issue? Car is currently not in this session. As far as the ZZ9 onboard, I'm not entirely sure why. Hopefully no one else is having issues.
We'll get Shenjay an invite just in case that he is having issues, but I didn't notice a notification saying that he had left the server.
Yeah, neither had I. Oh, this... Tell us in the chat, of course. Let us know what you think. How many safety cars are we going to have in this race? Because these wet conditions present serious challenges for these racers, and it was a very, very tight qualifying. The question is, will that translate for these drivers in these race conditions? And this could be a reason as to why we saw such a differentiation in the qualification grid. Normally things a little bit tighter in the club division, but these drivers, they're going to be running different setups, different ride heights, different aerodynamics on the front and rear wings, because they need to, of course, take into consideration these very, very slick and slippery conditions. Look at the visibility. We're on board with Domi right now, just in the rear of BTFU as the cars begin to approach the grid. Jump back even further down. You can see it with Burke Khan just pulling off a little bit from Distinctive. How much spray really comes into play here?
Yeah, and visibility down into turn 1 is going to be absolutely appalling for these drivers, and hopefully Shenjay is in control of that car once the race gets underway. As Steam's still saying he's here with us.
Well, very well. We are about to go racing here. Unicorn, take us away through racing action. It is Suzuka.
Yep, here we go. 5 red lights, and the drivers have seen them as well. So here we go. We are away here for a very, very tricky conditions, and ZZ9 has absolutely jumped Shenjay, and then there's Freeware coming up the inside of this Razor being pushed out of the track, and that's also one of the Williams. I believe that's Domi well off of the track as Remco Van Putten up the inside of Shenjay. As Freeware is in lead this race, we've got a VSC stopping any more overtaking. Mammal is up into P2. ZZ9's down 1. Fraser's dropped all the way down to 7th, and there's already a huge reshuffling of this grid.
This is very interesting. Shenjay's car is showing up as P1 right now on our timing tower. However, it is showing him behind Remco Van Putten.
Well, my timing tower is functioning, so I could give you all a rundown.
There we go. It's just fixed itself. It's just fixed itself. So Shenjay having an abysmal start here. VSC conditions have now gone offline. We're back to green flag racing as we make our way into the hairpin. Look at the position changes that we've had in this grid. And I have to say that VSC definitely neutralized some of the action. BTFU and Brainstew quite close, but there it goes. Remco Van Putten around the outside of ZZ9. Or on the inside, I should say, coming down into Spoon, and that's P3 for him. And it would appear some of these drivers running setups that aren't giving them the best conditions right now in those cars.
Yeah, but Freeware seems to be loving it. Domi now coming past Alex Biddo for P9. Hungarian back to where he started it. These guys, they've exchanged position, and Remco Van Putten has somehow picked up a 5-second penalty for ignoring a blue flag despite the fact that he is in 3rd place. So not quite sure what's going on there with the game.
Well, he can, of course,
Shenjay's
have that appeal.
wrestling this car.
Timing Tower is playing its usual tricks, but we found it to update itself usually by the end of lap 3. Hopefully that is the case. There goes Fraser on the inside of Zamis. Oh, give me some times, man. I want to be able to watch this race at some point today.
Yeah, Fraser struggling through the S's. But it's time to out. Remco Van Putten looking at the rear of Mammal down into the first Degner, not quite being able to make that move work. But these conditions making everything super tricky for the drivers. He's still looking. Mammal defending the inside, weaving a little bit there. That's thrown Remco right off, and Remco getting a big kick out of the rear. Is that going to allow ZZ9 through? It is. Is anyone else going to be able to get the run? I don't think Shenjay's got the traction. He's sliding this car through this race, and Zamis getting back past Fraser for P6.
I think their timing tower has stabilized for at the very least a moment for us to get in on some action right now. A lot of action happening through Spoon. Look at the rain coming down. There is so much rain, and look at ZZ9 now. He's been overtaken by Remco Van Putten, but Remco Van Putten has lost a significant amount of time to Mammal ahead. The interval's not currently updated for those two drivers. However, Shenjay...
Oh, and that's Rutanius. Huge lunge into the... I don't know if he's just missed a braking point or what there. But a big collision there. Zamis flies into the pit lane. Rutanius soldiering on with the damage. I don't know who else was caught up in that collision. There's Shenjay tight to the rear of ZZ9.
Freeware in P1 right now, pulling 3.5 seconds due to the fighting that Remco Van Putten was giving Mammal. Shenjay is not going to be even remotely thrilled, considering his qualifying pace was theoretically a cut above the rest, at the very least a cut above ZZ9 by 1/10 and a half, and you can see ZZ9 is ahead of him and pulling away. Shenjay is struggling right now. Domi hunting him down in P6, that Williams as well, and it's Fraser and Biddo who... Oh, Biddo has a front row seat. Fraser goes on the inside of Domi through the first Degner, now through out of the second Degner. That is Fraser through into 6th position. Alex Biddo, he's looking for a move, nearly touching that inside grass, but there goes Domi just tapping, I think, the rear of Fraser. The Ferrari now on the inside, on the exit. Not a lot of speed. You can see Domi has damage. Missing a front left end plate is the Williams.
I think Fraser's missing on as well with that tussle coming into the first Degner. So both the Williams and the Mercedes are probably going to lose out to Alex Biddo here because of that damage. You've got Brain Stew behind them as well. He's had a pretty charge from the start of this race. He's up 3 positions, as is Alex Biddo. And now with damage coming into play, the more patient drivers without this damage are going to start cutting through this field of guys whose cars are just a little bit less.
Fraser's had a big slip with the loss of traction on that front end. He's also going to come into the pit lane. This puts Alex into 6th. And now we've had a yellow flag through Sector 3. Not entirely sure. I think it might just be because of that pit from Fraser. Maybe slow coming in now. Wisp tight to the rear of BTFU, nearly a 10th on their way into turn 1.
Yeah, not quite sure what caused that yellow flag there. I think maybe Fraser might have clipped the wall on entrance and lost a bit of wing or something. I could have sworn I saw some debris flying off of someone's car, but nothing's come of it, and it looks like everyone is continuing on as per usual.
Remco Van Putten right now, he's just getting caught behind Mammal. Mammal dropping time to freeware, but Remco has not had an opportunity to really get ahead of this Williams. And of course, that penalty that he's holding on to, that penalty of 5 seconds right now for that, well, not entirely sure why he was given that penalty. It was for, of course, ignoring blue flags. He can have that appealed. And now Domi has taken a 3-second time penalty for corner cutting, and he's had an issue, it would appear. That entire front wing is missing, and Finn is ahead of him in 12th position. So Rain definitely playing with these drivers a little bit.
Yeah, I think Shenjay's the one. Maybe he didn't look at that weather report and Hopped on a dry setup in qualifying. So Fraser struggling as well as Remco getting very close to the rear of Mammal into the chicane. Freeware though up at the front, still setting fastest laps at 141.8. Not what we typically consider fast, but in these conditions, not a lot else these drivers can come up with, and obviously nowhere near conditions that we would see DRS enabled in. So Remco's going to have to get past just on pace and traction out of corners, etc. And
the only driver that has been able to get close to Freeware for that fastest lap in this session thus far is Alex Bitto, a 142.515 out of the Spaniard in 6th, and Freeware is sub 142 here, so I would say he's doing very well in lead of this race. Of course, we know how things go with Freeware. Pay attention to him coming out of that first pit stop here in this one. Now, Alex Bitto, it would appear, has made a move on Shenjie, coming through Sector 1 into Sector 2 as they make their way out of the second Degner. Yes, that is the Spaniard ahead. And, well, what's happened with him? He's had a big issue. He's come off on some grass. Alex is trying to hold well with those yellow flags. I think Remco might even drop to Shenjie here as well. Will he lose out to the Italian? Brainstew's coming through. Let's take a look at the front end. He's defending. There's a tap from Brainstew into the rear of the Dutchman, and he's sliding through Spoon. Oh, no. Does he have any damage? No, he does not. How fortunate after that is the Dutchman. No damage on that front end, but Brainstew, that's, I think that one might get reviewed. We'll have to see, of course. Shenjie now is going to have to hold off the Italian, and Alex Bitto starting to pull away. Nearly a second out of the pole sitter here.
That one's definitely going to be reviewed by the stewards. I'd be hard pressed to make a decision on that one because they weren't in the braking zone, so I think Remco fully entitled to pull over, but Brainstrew definitely wouldn't have been expecting it. But it's Remco who's paid the price, whoever's mistake that was.
Well, this has really given Alex Bitto a good taste of potentially some blood in the water here. He has been wanting to get onto the podium of Suzuka, I imagine, for some time. Yesterday he missed out narrowly. I do believe he collected 7th in Tier 1 action. Right now he's got Freeware, Mammal, and ZZ9 ahead of him. 2 seconds is the gap that he is currently starting to break down, or at the very least dancing within. And should any of these racers have an issue ahead of him, at the very least Mammal or ZZ9, he could be looking to inherit position. Freeware, however, is on an absolute charge. He is absolutely locked in here. Look at him. 8.5 seconds ahead is the AlphaTauri as he makes his way out of Spoon.
Well, Freeware's been super impressive in this race, but Alex Bitto, I think we saw him qualify in 10th place. He's now the biggest climber, tied with Brainstew, both of them up 6 places, and it looks like one of the Haas is that Whisper Ginicari. Ginicari has had an issue coming out of the hairpin. But Alex Bitto has been climbing nice and steadily. Brainstew's getting close to the rear of Shenjie as well. So I think what has happened here is these guys are climbing because their setups are way more attuned to the wet weather conditions than maybe the likes of Shenjie.
Ben's made contact with Gincari coming through the Spoon. Fraser and Zamis pass him by now, and things are quite tight as Gincari has damage on his front wing. Zamis is going to be looking to inherit a position as well as a result. Zamis had to come in early for fresh mediums. There's not mediums, wet tires. If only we saw mediums. There goes Gincari wide out of 130R.
Yeah, and it's not going to be long, I don't think, until we start seeing these drivers hop into the pit lane for a fresh set of wets. I think you can do a 1-stop, so... But you can also 2-stop. I imagine the pit window for most of these drivers is going to open in 5 or 6 outside. Brainstew almost losing it. He's lost a lot of time to Shenjie, but he's managed to catch his car there. And BTFU isn't too far behind, so another mistake like that would cost him the position to the racing point behind. And very, very lucky that he's caught that one.
Something to talk about here is BTFU. Let's take a look at the position changes. BTFU, he started this race in 8th. He's only made up 1 position. He's got some hard chargers behind him. Wisp has made up 5 positions. Brainstew, of course, moving ahead of him, has made up quite a few. But BTFU, I can say from experience and having raced with him in many, many league races, he is an absolute monster racer in the wet. He has extraordinary consistency, and consistency is definitely key in tricky conditions like this. So we'll have to see where he ends up. We'll check back in with him later. But meanwhile, ZZ9 is setting a personal best Sector 2 here, and he is hunting down Mammal still quite tight for that second position. Still half a second is the gap, just dancing around it. Overtake being utilized as well, and this is something that racers don't utilize too much in wet conditions, is that overtake, because it gives you that extra rotation, it gives you that extra wheel spin, which isn't something necessarily that you want in these conditions where you're looking for as much traction as possible.
Yeah, and these guys, especially when tire wear starts to come into this, it's not something you really think about in a wet weather race. You just think, it's wet weather all throughout, I'm going to be on wet tires the whole thing, and you're going to be on wet tires throughout the whole thing, but you're not going to be on the same set of wet tires. So coming in at the right time is still very important, despite the fact you are just going to switch out wets for wets. So these guys need to be thinking about that. It's going to start playing on their minds, or at least those who are thinking about it. But at the same time, you got the likes of Mammal, ZZ9, and Alex Biddo locked in a three-way contest for P2 at the moment. And
Freeware,
you've also got,
I have to say, is absolutely on a charge right now. He's gone. He is checked out, and this is very good for him. Should he make somewhat of a mistake, he has such a margin in lead of things right now. But something else to talk about is, as ZZ9 has been locked in with Mammal, this has allowed Alex Biddo, as we mentioned earlier, to catch up to things. He wants that elusive Suzuka podium, and it's sitting right in front of him. He's got two opportunities at it, really. He's got Mammal and ZZ9, and should these two come together, all he has to do is rub his hands together, be patient, wait for ZZ9 and Mammal to potentially, lock things together and sneak on through, and then it's just a fight for holding onto that position here.
yeah, and this fighting is going to only benefit Freeware more. 12 seconds clear of these guys now, and well, they've got to contend with each other, and Freeware, he's got to contend with no one. He is in as clear areas you like, and he's just going to use that to just continuously pace himself, keep himself going, and as long as he doesn't make a mistake, it should be smooth sailing from here on out.
A couple of trains going on right now. Brain Stew nearly looking at Shenjay for fifth there, coming through the S's, and as they make their way out of Dunlop, Shenjay getting a good chunk of traction on exit. I think Brain Stew was cost a little bit of time there, but there's still a train behind Shenjay for fifth position. Brain Stew and BTFU a part of that action, and it's also that train behind Mammal for P2. Meanwhile, you have Remco Van Putten within half a second of Rutanius. The only penalty that I do believe Remco Van Putten has right now is that odd ignoring blue flags penalty that he will more than likely get removed from the stewards in this race. So he doesn't really need to worry about that at the moment, I don't think. Meanwhile, Mammal, though, has a big worry in his rearview mirror, and that is the charging Mercedes and Ferrari, ZZ9 and Alex Biddo. But he's doing very well. He's keeping quite consistent at holding these drivers off, but as he's fighting and holding off these drivers, Freeware is very, very happy about all of it. Now, 13 seconds ahead for Freeware. He's having a superlative race here around Japan, and Remco has now made it ahead of Rutanius into 9th position.
Yeah, we're getting ever closer to the pit window. Who's going to be the first to jump into this pit box? And Alex Biddo very tight to the rear of ZZ9 as Shenjay has been overtaken by Brain Stew, I do believe. He's done well to hold him off for so long, and Brain Stew getting a little inside with both of these drivers. Seems to be showing. I think this 3.5 second gap between Biddo and Brain Stew is the differential between the dry and wet setup.
This is a big chance. Big chance for BTFU here. That was a big slip out of Dunlop for Shenjay, and BTFU loves these opportunities, and he's keeping things clean through the Degners. Very tight to the rear of Shenjay, and now Brain Stew's really stepped in it here. He's just taken a 3-second time penalty as well here, Unicorn. Look at that. So the McLaren in 5th now, 3 seconds. He's got Shenjay and BTFU barking up his gearbox. Of course, Brain Stew just overtook Shenjay for that position, and now it's Mammal fending off still from that Mercedes and that Ferrari. In the Williams, who'd have thought it? It's an AlphaTauri, 14.5 seconds ahead in lead of things.
Yeah, and I think another problem that BTFU's got right now is he's seeing Shenji just wobble around on what I think we can now safely say is probably a dry bias setup, if not a full dry setup. That's a mistake, because BTFU, we saw Shenji have that huge slide through Dunlop, but the Degnars are risky overtaking the dries. In the wet, it's almost impossible, as Dome has had an issue in that very section of the track. He's sliding all over the place with wing damage as well, and Shinikari right on the rear of Finn down there too. These guys have been close, but nothing to separate the two at the moment. But yeah, you can see Shinikari backing out. It doesn't want to cause any problems a bit later on the brakes. Trying to go around the outside. That's going to be very wet, but it looks like he's got it done. Very nicely done for the Haas driver.
It was a very patient move there. Shenji still hunting down, sorry, BTFU is still hunting down Shenji. Coming out of Dunlop, and this is a very tight battle that we're really going to see start to unfold in a moment here. I want to see how BTFU goes coming out of the exit, but I'll have to wait as Remco moves ahead of Wisp through into the first Degner and has dispatched, of course, the Haas for 8th position now. ZZ9 hunting down Mammal. BTFU not getting the exit he needed out of that hairpin. Will ZZ9 be able to do something about this Williams coming out of Spoon once again? We're on lap 11 as Freeware is just about to cross the line.
Yeah, it's worth pointing out none of the top 10 have pitted, and Domi's gone on to Inters.
A very interesting
The rain
choice.
is lessening, but the track is still absolutely soaked. There's significant spray coming off of all of these cars, and
Finn and Jinakari are doing the tango as Finn's made it back ahead of the Haas for the time being. Brain Stew's really catching up with this train behind Mammal right now.
I think what we're seeing here is just, you've got these pockets of drivers, but no one can get past each other without a mistake coming out of the driver ahead. Even Alex Bitter right now struggling. I think the tyres now starting to get to their last legs, and I think a pit stop after one more lap around the circuit wouldn't be misplaced. 1 or 2 laps time, I think everyone's going to be coming in. We're pretty much halfway through this race, and that's where you start to expect to see as one of the AlphaTauris has gone off. It's not Freeware. It's his teammate Finn, just completely parked on the inside of Spoon. So one having a superlative drive, the other having a very misfortunate evening.
Alex Bido, wheel to wheel with ZZ9. He's made the lunge into Spoon, and he's just taken the Mercedes for 3rd, and Mammal's next. Alex Bido does not want to wait around here. We were looking at Finn recovering as Alex made the lunge. He got the move clear ahead into Spoon. It was neatly done, and now Mammal's got big problems. And, well, Alex Bido's at the top of the list. ZZ9 is just further back behind.
Well, the Spaniard just said he looked a bit squirrely through the S's, but he's found some level of pace, and I don't think ZZ9 made a mistake either. Alex Bido's just been brave, and like you said, he's hungry for a podium around Suzuka, and a full wet race really would put his demons to bed, I think, as now, using overtake, Mammal's defending the inside. Is he going to go for another move around the outside? He's let Mammal go wide. And,
that was...
Alex Bido is hard charging.
That
right
was
now. He has
huge.
a point to prove.
That was huge, Unicorn. He forced an error out of the Williams, and what an error it was. Opening the door was, of course, Alex Bido for everybody behind him. Come on through, ladies and gentlemen. ZZ9 and Brains2 now, 3rd and 4th. Mammal, no damage on that front wing. Just a simple mistake in the wet. Sliding through a little too deep in turn 1, and it's cost him 3 positions. Oh, what a move from Alex Bido there. Really putting some pressure on, showing ZZ9, all you need to do, my friend, is just let them make the mistakes for you.
Yeah, but there's still a fair amount of time left to go in this race, and just because Alex Bidow's done a couple of good moves in the space of 2 laps doesn't mean he's immune from making mistakes towards the end of this race either. So this race definitely not won or lost, but if you had to put money on someone, well, 18.7 seconds is a pretty convincing argument that Freeware, who's currently sitting very comfortably at the top, is taking nice. And now the game suggesting that the pit strategy might have changed to intermediate tyres, and Remco Van Putten has followed Finn and Domi's idea.
Alex Bidow is coming in, ZZ9 behind him, Brainstew following suit, and I think Mammal's going to stay out here.
What's the call though? Is it inters or wets?
Well, I think it's going to be intermediates at the very least. It is for the Spaniard. There goes Alex. There goes ZZ9 behind him. Brainstew is serving a penalty in the pit lane, so he's going to come out a little bit further behind. Who's this now? Well, Shenjay and BTFU. So actually, Brainstew has managed to stay in 5th position behind ZZ9 and Alex Bidow. Mammal with the overcut. Something I wanted to talk about was when Alex Bidow was in 2nd position just for a moment. I have to say this. He was starting to actually take a couple of tenths out of Freeware, which tells me that Mammal might have just been a cork in the bottle for these racers in this grid. And should there be a mistake from Freeware, let's say, on these intermediate compound tires, should he go onto them, or he stay out maybe too long on the wets, causing himself a problem, as there's Finn still struggling. He's off right now in Sector 1. He's letting everybody through.
Stuff, I think Freeware has made a mistake, as has Mammal. They didn't pit last lap for inters. I think Freeware was a little bit closer. The pit strategy came up on my screen just after he'd crossed the pit line, but Alex Bidow has cut at least 5 seconds out of Mammal. So the inters right now are very much faster, and I think Freeware's still going to be in the lead, but I don't think he's going to have the 17.5 second lead that he had. So the gap now between Freeware and Alex Bidow, I think it's going to be a lot less than it was. Alex just set a purple sector 2. He is absolutely flying, and this intermediate tyre stint might have just brought him back into contention. Where is... Well, Freeware's out. Back on track, but where is Alex in comparison to him?
Yeah, we're about to get the timing in the tower now. 14.2 and dropping, because Alex Bidow has, of course, temperature in his tires, but they are just coming through Sector 1. So now Alex Bidow with a 14-second gap to Freeware instead of 19. So 5 seconds. 5 seconds is the amount of time that Alex Bidow managed to take out of Freeware on that undercut. That's a massive amount of time.
Yeah, that's worked wonders for Alex Bidow. Freeware, though, still, it's a very strong lead, but Alex Bidow's just set another fastest sector. And he's hunting the German. He is hunting him down. Whether we'll see him catch him in the remaining 12 laps, we'll have to wait and see, as Finn has retired his car in the pit lane, it would seem.
Shenjay hunting down Mammal right now. Shenjay, it's been a very, very unique race for Shenjay. Shenjay was the pole sitter in this race. He had a stellar qualifying. A stellar qualifying, and it could have been that maybe he did not see the weather forecast and was running a dry setup. Could be, considering how things have gone for him in this race, but he's very tight to the rear of Mammal now. Mammal was in P2 for some time. Got a yellow flag coming up through Sector 1, it would seem, and I think that's the retired car of Finn.
Well, I want to just propose something to you, Jeff. The track is clearing up. We're now on intermediate conditions. Do you think we're going to see Shenjay here start to come back through the grid? And his setup is set for dry conditions. He's been dropping because of the wet weather, but he hasn't had any huge issues. So he might start to find his pace.
I think you're right. I think that as these conditions dry up, Shenjay's setup is going to become more lethal. There goes Mammal again, a little deep through turn 1, and Shenjay was looking to execute for P6. Mammal holding it well. Shenjay showing good patience. No contact between the two. They're coming through the S's now as Fraser and Rutanius come through turn 1. And Fraser quite tight to the rear of Rutanius. Could be that the Mercedes was running a similar setup to Shenjay. Maybe his setup will come through in these intermediate conditions now.
Yeah, this switch to Inters, the forecast before the race didn't show this, I don't think. So,
ooh, Shenjay looking for a big lunge on Mammal into the hairpin. Mammal being quite courteous there, giving him some space. Had he not done so, I think Shenjay would have taken a serious amount of damage on that front wing. I think that was a little bit late. But now it's another run out of the Alfa Romeo. Is he going to go around the outside through Spoon? Mammal placing that car beautifully. But it's all about the exit now. Freeware is setting the fastest lap, a 1:38.2, leading things 14.5 seconds ahead of Bido. And Bido right now, ZZ9 was just shy, just outside of a second of Alex when they came through out of the pit lane. Now he's within that second, but they're dancing in it. Shenjay wheel to wheel with Mammal through the Casio Triangle chicane now. That's the Alpha on the inside through out of the exit. Now back to Mammal on the inside. Does he hold this? It's very tight, and Remco Van Putten has front row seats and popcorn in that charging Red Bull.
well, Shenjay just seems to have a renowned amount of confidence. Mammal's gone super early on the brakes. I don't know if Remco's got any damage.
No,
from
he's
that
good.
little
He's
contact.
good.
But Shenjay up into P6 now, and it looks like he's going to try run away, and he needs to do so before Remco, who's just come into this battle and wants to join in on the fun, gets a bit more ambitious with his pace. But Shenjay's wide through Dunlop.
Oh,
He's out of P7. Well,
there's contact. He's had a little bit of a wheel tab. I think he was trying to come back on circuit to maybe fend off from the Dutchman, but Remco is now into 7th, and this has exposed Mammal just the same. Remco showing great pace right now, and he's on 3-lap old intermediate compound tires. Of course, we are on lap 17 of this race. This is fantastic midfield battling that we are seeing between these three.
Yeah, these guys, the racing super close to Shenjay. He's going to be kicking himself. He was up in P6, and now he's not only got to overtake Mammal, but he's got to overrate Remco as well. And, well, we thought Freeware might have made a mistake of staying out
That
a
setup,
lap longer, but he's
that
just
setup is so dialed in here, George. That setup is just locked in. Locked in. Fraser right now is set up, showing similar signs that we see from Shenjay and potentially Van Putten, as Van Putten wheel to wheel with, oh, Mammal on the inside defending around. Is Remco going to get this done? We've seen Mammal defend well through that chicane already, but the pace coming out of that Red Bull is good. He's looking to defend off from the Williams. It's tight between these two. There's a little bit of contact. Shenjay's in on the mix. It's 3 wide into turn 1. Who's going to win out? Mammal in 6th right now, but he's done it again. He's gone a little too deep. He's opened the door again. Remco and Shenjay through 6 and 7 for the Red Bull and Alfa Romeo. But that was some very tight defense from Van Putten as well as Mammal.
It looked like Remco and Mammal there completely forgot Shenjay existed. Shenjay, he got a very nice run out of the final, the chicane, but then Remco and Mammal just came very wide, and he had to brake to avoid being sideswiped off the track by the pair of them. And then, again, he's up on the outside into turn 1, and, you know, he has to brake. Mammal goes deep, and it gains him another position, and now the battle between Remco and Shenjay is going to battle on whether they can pull away from Mammal, who seems to be the weakest link at the moment in the battle for these three positions.
Now,
I have to wait and see, but Shenjay needs to get a hold of and not make another mistake.
Shenjay is the closest gap on this grid, and he's just hunting down the Dutchman. These two have done battle before, and Remco Van Putten, not the easiest driver to get through on, and he's also a very aggressive attacker. So should Shenjay get through, he's going to be concerned for quite some time until he may be able to pull away from Remco. Of course, real quick, as we're looking at this battle, real big shout out to the Only Mojojo. Thank you very much for your Prime subscription. We greatly appreciate all of the support as always. One thing to talk about is, of course, that last move, that last defense. I do believe the stewards may look at it. I think the drivers are aware of the rules, but here it is. Finally, Shenjay with the lunge into turn 1. No aggressive defending, I should say, coming out of the Dutchman. Or, whoa, he's taking a 3-second time penalty. Shenjay going a little deep. Van Putten coming back through on the inside, taking a penalty, however. Shenjay going to be happy about that, except he's got 8 seconds. Remco's got 3. Remco had to also serve a 5-second penalty in the pit lane, given that ignoring blue flags penalty he was awarded for whichever reason earlier in this race. However, because he has served that in the pit lane, I'm not entirely sure how the stewards will be able to take care of that for him. It's very unfortunate. So, of course, all of those things get handled post-race.
Yeah, and again, these guys are super close, but even with that sort of jostle there, Mammel's still now out of the 1 second range and still dropping, so definitely not got the pace of the 2 cars ahead of him right now. We see him come into his own a little bit more towards the end of the race. Also, ZZ9, he's getting close as Shenjay and Remco Van Putten are exchanging again. Shenjay's got Dutchman down into 130R and is ahead before the corner. Remco getting very close to the rear of Shenjay, but keeping everything nice and tidy as they come out of the final corner.
This has been a fantastic race. I don't think the racers were expecting the wet weather. We always joke about it, and then it comes, and then it's like, oh, it's actually gonna rain. Lovely. Gonna give us a good race. And I have to say, for a full wet to intermediate campaign, this has been absolutely thrilling. It has been a very good race. This has been one of, I think, my favorite wet races to witness thus far in Misfits Racing League action. I think I'm sure you can agree. We haven't had too many of them that have really given us this much strategy, this much battling, and it's been a fantastic and stellar drive for freeware just the same in that AlphaTauri here, Unicorn.
Yeah, well, usually a wet weather race just sort of relegates everyone to just sitting back and just trying to keep the car on the track almost, but here today we've had some very, very ambitious fights from these drivers, and they've kept it mostly very clean. You've got Mammel, who's been involved in, battles up and down this grid in various fights for the top 10, and I think his biggest loss here is we've got a VSC, speaking about keeping it clean. Who's caused that? I think it's Brain Stew.
Yeah, it looks like he's had a big issue coming out of Spoon. Yeah, that McLaren is in the wall. Oh, that is terrible. Front left, I think the front left tire may be out on that car.
Such a good race.
Well, this is Alex Biddo's tearing down this interval now. Between freeware, he was 20 seconds a second to go, and now it's 18 and climbing. Well, dropping, I should say, for Alex Biddo. ZZ9's caught him up somewhat. Mammel still sticking with Remco quite well. Shenjay in 5th position as a result of Brainstew's retirement. 6.2 seconds for the pole sitter is now the gap to P4. And remember I was talking earlier about BTFU. He's having a stellar drive here. 4 positions he has made up in the rain, and I told you, he's one of the most consistent wet weather racers I know. And he's definitely shown it here today, so I hope he's able to keep that going and, well, give me a nice pat on the back later for calling it early. He'll be happy about that. Mammel still hunting down, of course, Remco. Remco now coming into some traffic. That's Jinakari in the Haas.
Shenjay's broken free of them. Shenjay's had enough. He's gone out of that fight, and well, he needs to, because he wants to keep his hopes alive for the title. And Alex Biddo and ZZ9, his 2 rivals, as Domi brings his car into the pit lane to prematurely end his race. But Alex Biddo and ZZ9 battling for the podium position. Shenjay's been locked in that tussle for 5th with Remco and Mammel in 6th and 7th. Shenjay wants to be up fighting for the podium, so he needs to at least clear BTF. I would imagine if he wants to just, keep himself very competitive. We've only got 4 races left in the championship after this, so every point matters in these closing stages, and right now he's missing out on points that Alex Biddo and ZZ9 are collecting.
Domi's car coming out through Sector 1, sparking up a yellow flag now. And of course, Remco is still under threat from Mammal. Mammal had a very, very tight opportunity coming into the Casio Triangle. And, well, Remco Van Putten held it well. Mammal, I think, frustrated that he couldn't get by the Dutchman, but we mentioned it earlier on Cass. Remco is not a driver you want to be stuck behind. That is for sure. But I guess in Mammal's case, neither is he, considering how long he held off ZZ9 until that crucial mistake that was actually forced not by ZZ9, but Alex Bitto, once Alex Bitto took a plunge through on the Mercedes. And that was a fantastic highlight for this race. Remco just 3, 4, 5 tenths ahead of Mammal here. Dancing within that half a second range are these two drivers.
Yeah, Shenje as well. I said he was breaking free, and he is doing just that, but he went wide through turn 1. So he's still not having the perfect race. ZC9 just still in the rear of Alex, but Alex has a lot more ERS to play with, and you can see the front two right now very comfortable. As well as Shenje. Shenje's got a fair bit of battery to play with as well, so we'll have to wait and see how these guys play out. In terms of this battery charge, whether we're going to see some late minute... I think Alex Bitto, obviously, he's not anticipating to catch freeware by the end of this race. We've got too few laps to close down such a monumental gap that's actually increased since freeware left the pit lane. But
what about the intermediate tires?
Defend against ZZ9.
Something I thought. You are on intermediate compound tires here around Suzuka. I think they will last to the end, but you're still going to have tire wear. You're still going to have slick conditions. And should freeware so much as make a mistake in 16 seconds ahead and lead of this race, Bitto and ZZ9 will be able to catch up, and then it's about recovering from that mistake. Will he have too much temperature in the tires? You have to take into consideration these variables. Alex is going to push as hard as he can to not only try and catch freeware, but he's got this charging Mercedes behind him, and I imagine ZZ9 wasn't too thrilled about the beautiful lunge that gave Alex this position earlier in this race.
I think tire wear it's going to be a little bit of a factor, because we saw it on the wets they were getting towards the end of their lifespan, and these tires are going to face the same. They all waited, so they're going to be a lap younger than the wet counterparts, if my math is correct on that front. But like you said, a spin is going to be pretty easy to do. You wouldn't be, surprised to see 1 or 2 come out of any of the drivers here. But the grid, especially in the midfield, is so tight that apart from these top 3, I think a spin, even on a BTFU, would drop him a good 2 or 3 positions. Because the grid, it may not look it on the track map, but given how much time you lose on a spin, depending on how bad it is, and factoring in for damage as well, could really cost people here. And Shenje now sets the fastest lap of the race. Is he going to try and start to hunt down BTFU? But Shenje, he has that penalty. Well, he's got 11 seconds, actually, of penalties.
Yeah, he's in trouble here to Remco Van Putten and Mammal. Potentially Wisp, should he take another penalty. Here goes Fraser. Wisp deep through turn 1. Fraser on the inside. Does he get this move done and dusted? Ooh, it's tight. Wisp drops off the rear now. And I think Fraser has locked in 8th position for the time being. Neat done. Neat done from him.
Yeah, and another thing, like a move like that late into the race, people aren't really, if you're not really expecting it, you're getting to the last few laps, you've been on your own for so long in the case of some of these drivers, or they haven't been in battles. They've probably seen a car in front, they've probably seen a car in their mirrors, but they've not actually been with a car. And as soon as one comes out of nowhere, you get, not surprised, but it takes you a bit, and if you're not adjusted to that battling, it's a very in-the-moment thing. You have to be warmed up and ready, and in conditions like this, if someone's just on their game, it can be very hard to defend against it if we weren't fully prepared for it, and a surprise move like that is the way to do it. And Alex Bitto now starting to utilize some of his battery, as is ZZ9, but ZZ9's got much less to play with. The Spaniard is starting to pull out a fairly sizable gap, and this is that defense I was talking about. We're in the last 3 laps of the race, this one included, and he knows he's just got to retain P2, and you can keep that championship hope very much alive.
I've been tuning in with Mammal in the Williams hunting down Remco, and he's had a big slide out on the exit of the chicane, but he was priming that move, and he's not going to be too thrilled about that oversteer, that snap, but he will look to prime the move once again. I even thought I had seen him trying to warm his tires into 130R, perhaps in preparation for the chicane, maybe to make a lunge, but Remco had positioned his car beautifully. He had just taken a trajectory into the turn that Mammal knew there was going to be no way through on the Dutchman, and this is something we've seen him do race after race throughout this season. It is, of course, the 18th round of the Club Division. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We hope you've been enjoying this race. And, of course, if you have been and you're looking for more racing action just like this, help us out and hit that follow button.
Yeah, it has been a very, very interesting and exciting race, and Alex Bido now, if DRS wasn't able to just got rid of ZZ9 out of that 1 second range, obviously the rain has prevented us seeing that one DRS zone down this start finish straight from being utilized, but a good drive from him, and it's been, you know, it's a track that he's, you know, well known for the wrong reasons, and now this drive, this race might be putting him on the map. Is Mammal gonna have a look around the outside? Remco Van Putten just parking that car wide enough, and Mammal for me has that rev glitch, and Remco,
he's got a problem.
He wanted to hold him off, but here he comes. Mammal switches to the outside. What can Remco do about it? Mammal looked up the wrong door. There's no way he was going to squeeze through on the inside there, and that leaves Remco ahead for the time being.
Benjay really barking up BTFU's rear now. This rain has been with us from start to finish of this campaign. It's been a stellar race, I have to say. We've got 5 retirements, but most of them of their own accord. Shenjay on the inside now. He's making that lunge, and he has made the move into 4th position. The Alfa Romeo dispatching the racing point of BTFU now. Will BTFU have an answer for this as Freeware has crossed us in to the final lap of running? That AlphaTauri has been absolutely checked out in this race. 17 seconds ahead of his nearest rival in Alex Bido. And Alex Bido has had his own issues, and that's, of course, ZZ9 in his rearview mirrors.
Well, I don't think BTFU necessarily needs an answer for Shenjay, because Shenjay just has a whole host of penalties. So I don't think there's, something.
He's wheel to wheel with the Dutchman now. They're coming through the chicane. He's trying to hold on to the inside. He gets squeezed off a little bit there from the Dutchman. Mammal, though, taking a 3-second time penalty, and Fraser has caught up with this, and it's now a 3-car fight, but he's going to have another look at the Dutchman coming down into turn 1. We're on the final lap of this race. He looks for the inside. Remco holding the car in a very unique position. Mammal pushing his way through. This is exposed Remco to Fraser. That's Mammal into 6th position. Remco in 7th, and Fraser looking for a final addition to his points total in 8th at the moment. Penalties on the board as well for these racers, each one of them with 3 seconds, so nothing going to happen at the line. This is all going to have to come down to passing on track, Unicorn.
Yeah, this is all down to the wire. It doesn't matter what the penalty situation is. I think the only penalties that are going to cost anyone is Shenjay and BTFU, I would imagine. So it really is a matter of time. Who is going to do it? Mammal defending Remco a bit too much. That's Fraser up the inside of the pair of them. Remco is off the track, and here comes Wisp. He's got 3 seconds as well, so Wisp now up into 8th. Fraser's up into 6th. He's dispatched both the Williams and the Red Bull, and Wisp is up into P8 now, and Fraser is going to bring home a nice chunk of points for the Mercedes crew, because he's going to come home in P6, but his fuel light, all of their fuel lights are on, so fingers crossed they've got enough fuel. If they don't, Mammal could be in for some points, because he has not got enough fuel light. But Fraser all out of ERS. Mammal completely depleting his battery, trying to catch him before 130R. The podium set, BTFU gets Shenjay on penalties, but this race is far from over in the midfield. Fraser in P6 right now. The penalties are the same. It's going to be the Mercedes to the line who leads the Williams, who leads the Haas of Wisp. But Mammal, Fraser's killed it on the line. What's he done there?
Not entirely sure what Fraser's done there, but he's just gifted Mammal. He's just gifted Mammal P6. Look at the difference in the wow. 0.24. That
What
is
did Fraser do?
that is 200ths of a second between these two, and he has just gifted this driver 2 points.
Was that deliberate? I can't. I'm so baffled.
That race, start to finish, I have to say, was thrilling. Alex Bitto, one heck of a drive. One heck of a drive. Alex Bitto getting a podium, getting a P2 in Suzuka. He'll be thrilled about that, but no any more thrilled than Freeware. What a superlative race from the German in that AlphaTauri. What a win. What a win from him.
Fraser, he ran out of fuel.
Fraser ran out of fuel.
I had a look at them, and they all had that red warning light, but it appears Fraser might have been the biggest loss there. That's so unfortunate, and it's so close as well, but...
Well, that race gave us a lot of stuff, but a safety car wasn't one of them. Full wet conditions at the start of things, moving into intermediate conditions. That was one heck of a drive, and it was a superlative race for Freeware. 5th from the grid. He takes the win with 18 seconds the gap. 18 seconds the gap to his nearest rival in Alex Bitto. Alex Bitto as well. You can't fault him. 10th to 2nd here for the Spaniard, and he's got a checkered past here around Suzuka, so he will be thrilled in the Ferrari with that, as well as the fact that he has made it ahead of all of his championship rivals in this race. ZZ9 falling 3rd here, Shenjie falling 5th. BTFU collected a very nice 4th position in a reserve capacity today over at Racing Point. 8th to 4th for the American. And Shenjie, he lost out massively. He had a superlative qualifying, a massive lap from him, but it was 1st to 5th for him at the end of this. Mammal, 4th to 6th. He had a very good defense in 2nd position for quite some time in this race, and a very dynamic drive. Fraser losing fuel at the line. He ran out of gas. That's right. He lost out to Mammal by 0.24 of a second. That's right. Just shy of 200ths of a second between those two as Fraser ran out of fuel. 13th to 9th, of course, for Wisp, I do believe. That was just a fantastic race all around. I am thrilled with that one. What about you, Unicorn?
I mean, the club division has been, over this season, a great source of some of the best races. And I think that one's up there as well. That was absolutely superb from these drivers. Very few, major incidents that the stewards are going to have to look at. There's definitely a couple, but in full wet conditions around Suzuka, with close battling as well. I think that's the key here, that it's just so close. These conditions, around any track, you don't really see it. And Suzuka, things like the Degners, they're super difficult to overtake through. And you've got people looking, they're not going from it, they're looking, they're trying to pressurize everyone. And they're just pushing the buttons of the drivers ahead, constantly applying pressure, trying to just make that mistake. And we saw Alex Bitto, a well-deserved Driver of the Day award for him, because that move into turn 1, those 2 laps where he got past both, I'm trying to think who it was now, Mammal and I believe Remco as well, possibly. That was a brilliant couple of laps from him, and then he, secured the P2 as well. Gets past ZZ9 in that move as well, and just obviously we got to say congratulations to Freeware. At the start for Freeware, it's hard to remember all the way back 27 laps ago, but the start was absolutely incredible. And BTFU, you said it, we didn't really talk about him too much other than just complimenting his consistency, but a quiet race is a good race in some ways, and he's just climbed, I think, 4 or 5 positions in that race, and a very, very nice job for him, just missing out on the podium, but
yeah,
still a great drive from a lot of these drivers. And we didn't see too many on-track DNS. A lot of DNS were just people pulling into the pit lane. I think only 2 or 3 actually retired because of the conditions. So a super nice job from all of the drivers here. A few standout jobs.
Yeah, it was a fantastic race. Thank you so much, of course, everybody in the chat, everybody who's been tuning into all of the racing action. That has now finished us out for the week of Japanese Grand Prix, of course. Thank you so much to everybody who subscribed today. Nigel, Mojojo, thank you so much for your Twitch Primes, as well as, of course, OG Prime Boss. We greatly appreciate your subscription as well. Everybody, the support you guys have given us has just been overwhelming. So thank you so much. We are going to raid a member of the Formula One community. It's just a lovely, lovely community, and we like to give back as best we can. So thank you so much for tuning in. We will see you all, of course, this coming week. It is the week of United States Grand Prix racing action. We are going to be kicking that off this Tuesday, European Division. That's at 8 p.m. GMT for all of you over in the UK, of course, and we have that at 2 p.m. CST for those in North America. That's Central Standard. Thank you so much. All right, guys. That's going to wrap it up. We're going to show you out with the outro as always. You can even take a look at, of course, the the lovely Alex Bitto Suzuka moment. But we're going to hit up Mr. Darian Alfie. Thanks, guys, and see you on Tuesday.